Okay, so the first thing I noticed is actually that I goofed a bit. I called this the NST31 upgrade. It's looking at my own ISO here in system. I realized that this is the wrong, I gave it the wrong name. It's make sure you give your VMs meaningful names. VMware, VM1, VM2, and VM3 doesn't really help you remember where you are, particularly if you're dealing with a large number of VMs that you only use every so often, or even if you've got a large number of VMs that you're using all the time. Do yourself every favor when you're naming things. Have a naming convention and stick to it. If you can. Now, we tend to discourage password reuse, but particularly in a purely test-based setting, if you're not exposing any of this to production, if you have to use the same username and password combinations on multiple virtual machines, just so you don't have to break another one of our rules, which is to never write anything down, never write any passwords down, that is. You should be writing lots of other things down on a regular basis. So anyway, I have renamed my NST31 upgrade to Fedora 3X. So click OK, and I'm going to start it. And give it just a minute. I may have to pause this from time to time. Okay, here we go. Previewing it. So you'll get this preview pane. This is roughly analogous to the console pane in, here we go, good. Roughly analogous to the console pane in Windows VMware Workstation. Okay, okay. So enter. One thing you might want to fix as you go along, okay, you can reclaim your keys with your Control-Alt, I think. Let's see, so it is doing its check. Oh, this is easier. With VMware Workstation, you sometimes have to tell it to give you your mouse back. The next thing I'm going to do after this, after I've installed this one, is install Fedora Security Live 31 in VMware Workstation. And as you can see, it's coming up. This is all stuff that the kernel is doing in the background as the boot process runs. If you wanted to look at this after the fact, you would lose all the pretty colors, but you could see it using the dmessage command. You might need sudo privilege to do that. A lot of the really important logging is locked down so that only root or a sudo user can see it. If you want to work on resizing these things, you can do that. And I can see what it's doing. That's the paging is after, and this is what Fedora 31 looks like. You've got two options here. You can just try it for a while, kick it around and see how it works, and then install it to the hard drive. The first thing I'm actually going to do is change my display settings. Fedora comes out of the box running at 800 by 600. And for the GUI that the Fedora installer uses, that's really not sufficient. What I'm going to do is crank this up. I'm not going to go completely nuts. I'm going to do the 1280 by 960. I'm going to keep the 4:3 aspect ratio. There, keep changes. Now this is going to be a lot easier to work with. And actually I'm going to go ahead and maximize. Close that. I'm going to click install to hard drive. I might have to pause this from time to time. And I paused it about the time it was ready to come back to me. A lot of Linux installations processes start right here, essentially. Choose your language and your keyboard layout. Whether it's two screens or ones kind of depends on the installer in question. I can see I'm working with Fedora Workstation. I can see it's 31. I can see I have a network connection. I'm not going to make any interesting changes here. One of the first things you have to do one of your first key decision points is what to do about the hard drive. Now, if you click in and you go out and it doesn't, if it doesn't register that, hey, I've picked a hard drive, go back in and out a few times. So I don't need to make any changes here, so I'm going to click Done, and I'm going to give it a chance to think. Saving the device configuration. There we go. Good. We're going to begin our installation. Chicago time zone, that puts me in Central Time. Good. It's going to configure my storage. What it's essentially, now this is a slightly different process than, say, a Fedora-based install, because the Fedora-based install will ask you very specifically if you're good and ready to write these new partitions to disk. It's going to start installing stuff, and at some point it's going to ask me about root passwords and things. But for the moment, I'm going to pause because this can take a while. It's 10:12, and we'll see how long this takes when I get back. Okay, it's been a couple minutes. I'm going to put this back into scaled mode. Switch. Okay, there. Okay, one of the things that VirtualBox does a little bit differently is it tends to pop things out. Whereas with VMware Workstation, everything kind of runs in the console, unless you tell it to do otherwise, say create a new window. With VMware, with VirtualBox, it pops things out like this. So I am going to let it keep going. If I had a bunch of VMs here, I would see them. The user experience is a little bit different with VirtualBox, obviously, as compared to VMware Workstation. With VMware Workstation, I got my library here. I've got my thumbnail bar here, which is really very useful if you're juggling multiple VMs or multiple install processes. I've got my tab view. This here is what we call, for VMware, is what we call the console view. You can actually run things this way, but if you start them, the console part over here is going to go away, and the VM screen view is going to more or less monopolize this space. Now, one thing to note about VMware Workstation is every one of these VMs that you have preloaded, shall we say, in a tab, there's a lock file in each of those directories in the storage location for your VMs, even if they're not running. So if you need to move something, you need to close it out completely, so that you don't have to worry about moving the lock file. So let me see, let's go back to VirtualBox here, and it's still thinking. This is actually going pretty quickly, and let me scale it up. Actually, let me adjust this a little bit. Let me squish that. Let me see, so I've got my, I note that my my VDI file, I have changed the name of the VM, but the name of the VDI file has not changed. That's not a major issue now, but it might be later. I can see my video controllers, my audio, my network. It's natted. It reaches through to see my physical NIC. Let me pause this again. Okay, so this is the installation is finished. I'm going to reboot. It has not asked me about a username and a password, which is frankly a little bit interesting. We'll see how that goes when it reboots. What I may have to do is figure out what the default live running password is and go at that. Because absolutely you don't want to use this. There's no Linux and Unix rather have always been true multi-user systems. If you're not logging into the system, you're doing it wrong. So let me see about rebooting live system user. Okay, hold on. Let me see. Let me check. I want to check something right quick. Because it doesn't seem to be terminal. What I'm going to do is see if I can't find that root password somewhere in dmessage. Live user localhost.live. Notice I've got the $sign, which means this is a non-root login. I'm going to put dmessage to less. I can use the slash character to okay. I'm using the slash character to indicate a search term. Let's see. You know what? I'm actually going to do this with grep. Okay. Because some live boots will tell you what the password is. You just have to pay attention. You just have to watch while the system is booting. In any case, I am going to reboot now because it didn't believe me the first time. And I'm going to pause. And I have a problem, which is that it didn't believe me. Let's see. Machine, tools, let's see. I think what I'm going to have to do is remove the ISO so it doesn't boot from it anymore. Just a second. So what I'm going to do there is go to my settings, remove disk from virtual drive, force the unmount, capture, and then actually, okay. Okay, hold on. Okay. So I removed it.